Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Jon Reid, and today I'm going to be talking about designing for jQuery Mobile. Basically, what I want to talk about today is how you can design, how you would actually go about designing a new look and feel for jQuery mobile applications. In order to do that, I'm going to talk about how jQuery mobile actually implements designs itself. It does have a particular way of handling things, so we need to talk about that. Then I'm going to talk about a tool that the jQuery mobile team has produced that helps you actually make new themes. And then if that's not good enough for you, then we're going to talk a little bit about actually creating entirely new appearances for jQuery mobile applications. We'll talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls and advantages there are for doing that, and what you need to be aware of when you're actually in that process. Today, though, this is a talk. In the past, my talks about jQuery mobile have been pretty technical. This one I wanted to do designed more for designers rather than for programmers. So we're not going to cover much coding. We might take a peek at some CSS just to sort of demonstrate how jQuery mobile is organized, how jQuery mobile CSS is organized, but we're not going to talk about actually implementing these things or really get into code or anything like that. This is more geared towards designers who are wondering, you know, how I only see this one particular way jQuery mobile looks. Can I change it? Because designers love to change things, and that's one of the things that jQuery mobile actually makes possible. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Now my other talks are much more technical, and the one we're doing in a couple of weeks will be very technical. So if you're a developer, hold on for those. Those are going to be good. So before we get started, though, let me tell you a little bit about myself. As was mentioned, I am the author of O'Reilly's jQuery Mobile book, which we're in the process of updating. I've been working on that for a while, but it's been so busy, so I haven't made much progress, but we are. And then I do have a pretty extensive engineering background. I've worked for Motorola, and I'm currently working at Google. I've worked on genetic analysis software, business software, point-of-sale software. I've got some pretty extensive engineering under my belt, and I also have a very extensive agency background. I've worked for EffectiveUI, which is one of the top user experience agencies in the country, and I've also worked for Crispin Porter and Boguski, which is one of the top advertising agencies in the country. And between these two things, this has given me a really good idea of what it's like to sort of be in the trenches and building the web. So I try and bring that sort of point of view to my talks. If you're interested, that's my blog there at webdev.dreamwidth.org, and you can follow me on Twitter if you want. I don't tend to tweet very much, but that's where I am if you'd like to see what I have to say. So let's get right to it. So jQuery Mobile does, as I said, come with a pretty sophisticated theming system. They have their own sort of vocabulary that we'll go over here. The theming system is based on CSS3, so that's what it uses to do all of the rounded corners and gradients and drop shadows and everything like that. In the past, those would have required, cutting up graphics and that sort of thing. But when you use CSS3, you don't have to do any of that. You just basically make a couple of minor changes to your code, and everything falls into place. So it's very, very fast, very easy, also very lightweight. There's no graphics or anything like that. jQuery Mobile does have its icons contained in one small Sprite sheet. But other than that, there are no graphics associated with any of the visual elements that we're about to look at. So sort of bear that in mind as you're doing your designs. And conceptually, the jQuery mobile theming system separates the idea of layout styles from decorative styles. So layout styles are things like padding and positioning, and decorative styles are things like background colors, gradients, drop shadows, the colors for text, those sorts of things. So because I've separated out those two things, it makes it very easy to create a lot of different looks and feels without actually having to completely revamp all of your CSS. So a jQuery mobile theme consists of two things. It consists of a set of global settings, which are things like a font family, the radius of your corners, your box shadows, and then it consists of a set of color swatches. These swatches are a set of color specifications for foreground and background colors, text shadows, and so forth for all UI elements. So basically the idea is that you have a set of color swatches that describe the way you want everything to look, the way you want text to look, the way you want buttons to look, and so forth. And then you combine these swatches to actually make individual pages. You don't have to make, each swatch doesn't have to be a particular page itself. Instead, what you do is you combine individual swatches. So the best way to talk about that is to show you the default jQuery mobile theme that comes with. It has 5 swatches, which they've labeled A through E, and that's a convention that jQuery Mobile has where they've named their swatches A through E. So if you're going to be coming up with your own swatches, it's a good idea to go ahead and name them that yourself. The swatch A is the highest level of visual priority. So you can see here it's very dark. You probably wouldn't present this as a page to the users directly. Again, this is just when you want to have visual emphasis on a particular element, like the on-off button there, and you wanted that to be emphasized on the page, this is the swatch you would specify. You would say, I want this button group to be in swatch A, and so forth. So this is a swatch for visual emphasis. Swatch B is sort of a secondary swatch. It talks. It's just a little less. It's a little less dark than the other ones. Has a little bit more blue in it. The jQuery mobile default theme runs on black and blue and gray, which is looks very good on most mobile devices. But you shouldn't feel like you're limited to those particular colors. And I'll show you an example in a minute here of something that I've done. Swatch C is the baseline, and this is what's used by default for most content. And so you can see it's nice and very high contrast, which is good for mobile devices, and so forth. So by default, if you just start writing jQuery mobile pages out of the box, swatch C is what's used for most content. So when you are designing your swatch C, bear that in mind if you create a swatch like that. Now, it's easy to actually swap out swatches. You can specify which swatch you want for which element or even an entire page, so it's not a problem to change that. But if you're just doing stuff out of the box and don't want to actually mess with your HTML, this is the base swatch to be using. Now, jQuery Mobile's default swatch does have a swatch D, which is sort of an alternate secondary swatch. It's not much different than swatch C, and their swatch E is their emphasis swatch. So this is what they use for like error conditions. So if you do a jQuery mobile application and it pops up the page not found dialog, for example, you'll see it's in this particular swatch. It's got that yellow background and so forth. Now, as I mentioned, you can combine swatches as needed. You can easily mix swatches on a page. You can say, I want this swatch for this set of buttons and this swatch for that set of buttons. Sometimes you can even mix swatches within a UI element. So if you had a group of buttons, for example, a list of buttons, and you wanted to say, these two I want to call particular attention to, I want to emphasize in particular. So you could say the entire group I want to be in swatch C, but these two I want to be in swatch E. You can do that. On a default jQuery mobile page, as I mentioned, the header and footer are rendered in swatch A, while the main content area is rendered in swatch C. So if you imagine swatch C here with the header and footer, it has its own header. You can see there at the top the very, very lightly colored C. This is actually the color that it would be, that darker black, that black swatch A there is actually what the header and footer would look like. So you can imagine that helps create a much more interesting visual experience for the user than just this straight up gray color. So let's see here. We'll move on to the next slide. And you can have as many swatches as you want. You're not limited to just those few. You can have as many as you want. For example, if you wanted to present different appearances for things based on the login state of your users, whether they're logged in or logged out of your application, you could completely do that. If you have different roles in your application, for example, if you have an administrator role and you want to make sure that visually your application demonstrates to the user, hey, you're logged in as an administrator, be careful what you're doing. You can have different swatches for that and combine them as needed. If your application is smart enough to be able to determine whether or not it's online or offline, whether or not its host device is actually on the internet, you can have different swatches for that. Obviously, you can have swatches for error conditions, and you can also have swatches for branding. I've used this before for that particular thing. It's actually really easy to brand an application with swatches. It's almost a way of skinning, but a little more. It's more featureful than just that. So I've done that in the past, and I found that to be pretty useful. Now, you may be wondering how you actually go about changing these things, how you go about creating this stuff. And jQuery Mobile has built a tool that you can use to actually access all of this. They built a theme roller tool for jQuery Mobile. It's pretty sophisticated. It has, if you're familiar with jQuery UI, you've probably seen their theme roller. It's similar to that, but it's a little bit better. It's a little bit more modern, and it has some different capabilities. But it basically works the same way. It gives you access to everything that you need to be changing in a particular theme. You can create your own swatches. You can import and export themes. You can save them so that you can actually apply them to your project, and then you can also share them with people if you want. So I'm going to do a quick demo of this here. Let me go ahead and fire up my screen share. Great. Okay, so this is just the jQuery mobile page. It's jQueryMobile.com. And if you scroll down to the theming section, you can see they've got a link to their theme roller, so I'm just going to fire that up here. The theme roller is a nice separate tool that you can use for doing this sort of thing. So it has a nice welcome page. I'll just go through real quick what the different features are here. There's a lot going on here, but basically this just gives you access to everything that you would need to do in a particular theme. So you can see they have a tab here for the global settings. Over on the right-hand side, or over on the left-hand side, they have a tab here for the global settings. So you can set your font family. You can set the active state for things, including gradients. There's your corner radius for groups and for buttons. They've separated out. So if you want to change that here, let me change the group. The group corner radius here. If I squeeze that out, you can see I'm altering the corner radius of the groups here. See there. Now they're all square. Now they're very round. So you can go ahead and modify that. You can also type directly in here if you want to. It gives you access to how you want the icons to appear. You can see there's a disk in there, so you can change the color of that if you want. They have full color management for that. You can change the opacity if you want it to be very, very, very dark, or you can change it back to 10 if you want it to be very subtle. You can have disk or not if you want. It's up to you, and what color you want the icons. The icons come in either black or white. That's what's in the Sprite sheet. So that's typically good for icons in most situations. You can, of course, redo the icons in your own colors if you want, but we're not gonna cover that. That's a more advanced thing to do. And then this also handles the box shadows, and then individual swatches. You can change the header and footer bar. You can change the body colors. You can change, and then for the buttons, each button has three states. It has a regular state, it has a hover state, and then it has a pressed state. And you can change each of those things. You can change what they look like using this tool as well. Now, once you have all of that done, you can download your results so that you can actually do that, or you can even share. You can even share things. I actually have a link here of a swatch of a theme that I made earlier, and I'll show that to you in a second. Now, one of the cool things about this is it gives you very good control over the colors that you want to use. So if you have a particular, most projects will have a particular set of colors that you're going to be using, and perhaps it's due to branding or whatever. This does give you the ability to be able to do that. And in fact, if you don't already have that, you can create your own. And this also works with Adobe Cooler, which is where you can go and look and see what other people have come up with as far as some base colors to use. So I always like to take a look at the popular colors, and this elevation one is one of my favorites. You can go and take a look at it at Cooler if you want, but this is one of my favorites, and I actually used it to build a custom theme here, which I'll just put in my URL, and it will load in my theme. So you can see here I've used these colors to actually implement my own swatches, and you can see my swatch A here, which is the one with the most visual emphasis. This is what things will look like when they're being emphasized. My swatch C is what things look like when I want for just in general. I don't know that this collection of browns and grays would necessarily look good on some screens. We'd probably have to test that out, but I think it looks pretty good. And then my error swatch is pretty contrasty and uses some of the other colors a little bit better. I might actually would want to change, maybe add in a little bit of red in here. I don't know, but that's what you give. Now, one of the nifty things, if you're wondering what goes to what. The application does have an inspector, so if you turn this on, as you mouse over things, you'll get a green box, and if you click on one of these elements, it'll take you to the setting that actually modifies that. So in here, I clicked on the list header, and it took me in Swatch A, and it took me to Swatch A's header and footer bar. So now I know exactly where I need to go to make a change for something. Or if I want to change this will take me to, whoops. Some of them work a little bit better than others. Yeah, so there's the button normal. Let's see here. This is the content body and so forth. So let's see here. This should take me to Swatch B's body colors. Yes. And this is also a body color and so forth. So that gives you a nice way of doing that. Now, when you're done, you can download your theme. It gives you instructions for how to use it. You can save it, and it downloads it as a zip file, and then you just go ahead and unzip it and put it into your project directory, and that's all it takes to happen. So if you're working with a developer and the theme roller is going to give you sufficient control over everything that you want, you can just agree with your developer ahead of time. These are going to be the swatches that I'm going to specify for these parts of the interface. And you can go ahead and make your changes here and then change them as you want without having to necessarily change any code in the system or have the developer make any changes. So that does sort of free you up a little bit to experiment and try different things and so forth. Now, if you do come up with a particular setup that you would like to share, basically you click on the theme link, and it gives you a URL that you can use to share with other people. And you just email this to whoever who wants it, and they can load it in. And then from here, they can go ahead and make changes to it. Your original theme won't change, but they will be able to change it themselves and generate a new theme link if they want and send it back to you. So you can even collaborate that way. If you're working with another designer, maybe another designer at your client's office, and they need to take a look and make sure that you haven't gone too far off the beaten path for their branding. This is one way of doing that, and they can even suggest changes back if they want. And this gives you the opportunity to be able to. This gives you a nice tool for doing that. Now these URLs are good for 30 days. After that, they can't keep them around. So if you're going to be doing anything longer than that, you should probably download your stuff. But this is a nice way for doing collaborative work like that. And then there is a help center here if you want. You can also modify the lightness and saturation of your colors. So right now they're giving you a nice nice basic color swatch. So if you wanted to sort of lighten that up a bit and tone down the saturation a little bit, that gets it a little more, application-y looking, if you will. But really, I found most of the work that I want to do is from Cooler, and you can take these, and you don't necessarily have to use these directly. You might want to take these base colors and then come up with variations on them and so forth. I guess I probably don't need to lecture designers about color theory. So I found that to be a good way of sort of inspiring myself for different colors for so forth. And again, you can have as many swatches as you want. So if you wanted to have an extra swatch here, you would just click on it, and then over here in swatch F, you make the changes that you want to change. So let's say I actually want to make this one a little bit different color here. So I'm going to change the body, and you just drag and drop your colors, background color like that, and I want my text to be a little bit, that's actually what I meant here. And you just drag and drop your colors and so forth. It's really easy. It's really easy to handle, and you can see how quickly I was able to create a different effect there just by dragging and dropping colors. So you can have, like I said, you can have as many swatches as you want. This application I think is limited to just A through Z, so you can only do 27 on here. But if you're going to need more than 27 swatches, you probably might want to consider building a couple of different themes, I would think. So that's the jQuery Mobile Theme Roller. We'll go back to our presentation here. If you look at the jQuery Mobile widgets, and you could see several of them in the theme roller there. You could see all of the way buttons look, and the widgets that do exist. If you look at those and you are thinking to yourself, well, those are great and everything, but they're really just not the way I want my stuff to look. I want my stuff to look considerably different than than the control that the theme roller gives to me. I want to actually have tabs instead of buttons or something along those lines. You can do that. jQuery Mobile does give you the capability of doing that. So if you're going to go off the beaten path and create a completely custom jQuery Mobile theme, there's a few things you have to bear in mind, and I'm going to give some suggestions for some best practices for doing that as well. So there's a few things to bear in mind. First of all, jQuery Mobile, the way it handles things is it uses progressive enhancement, a technique where basically you write basic HTML, you write basic semantic HTML for your pages and your content and your buttons and so forth, and then and then in that markup you include a custom data attribute that jQuery Mobile is programmed to recognize, and it will, when you load in the jQuery Mobile library, as the page loads, it will go through, it will look for those custom data attributes, and it'll know, oh, this is a page, this is a set of buttons, and so forth, and it applies, it updates the markup itself. It adds CSS styles and so forth. So that's what you need to bear in mind while you're doing this. Now, it's possible to completely update, to completely create custom CSS for your custom theme. It's actually very common for us to have a basic jQuery Mobile theme that we've modified considerably with Theme Roller, and then, for example, there's a couple of things that we just want to completely override. So we'll have the regular jQuery Mobile theme CSS, and then we'll have our own custom CSS that just overrides some particular styles. Excuse me. And while you're doing this, though, it's important to remember that you're working in a particular medium, and that medium does have strengths and challenges that you'll need to bear in mind. For strengths, remember that the CSS3 technology doesn't involve any graphics. So if you want to change anything, it doesn't require graphics production or anything for it to be tested. Basically, to change border radiuses or drop shadows or anything, it's just a quick code change, and that makes the results very lightweight. So you don't have to worry about the old-fashioned ways of doing things. Now, the other advantages in this particular with mobile devices is they tend to have very sharp displays. Now we've got the new retinal displays, or I guess they're not so new anymore. So you can actually do fairly detailed and subtle designs, so you have a lot of strength in that particular medium. And then, of course, remember that you'll be working with a touch interactive medium, and so some things are going to be less important in that situation. So, for example, if you remember, the theme roller gives you control over, for buttons, it gives you control over the overstate. In touch interactions, you tend to not have overstates. They tend to be less important. So just sort of bear that in mind while you're working with your designs. There are some challenges that you have to be aware of, particularly for technical challenges. You have to be aware of platform variances, and I'm sure we all know this. But this is a particular problem on Android phones, unfortunately, where we have variances in screen size, what buttons are available as far as hardware goes, where they are, and so forth. Those can be particularly difficult to overcome and might require a little bit of extra thought. And then, unfortunately, although CSS3 is great, unfortunately, some platforms do have some older implementations of CSS. So we have to sort of bear that in mind. So some platforms might have a difficult time doing some of the fancier CSS stuff, like maybe three-way gradients or something along those lines. So as long as you bear that in mind, you'll be okay. Now, as far as user challenges go, because remember, we're actually designing all of these things for users, you have to bear in mind the user's environment. They're typically going to be moving. These are, after all, mobile devices that we're designing for. And so as users are moving, they don't see subtle visual cues that you might think. And while they're moving, so like a very subtle 2% gradient, they probably won't notice that. Although it looks really good on your design screen in your studio, it might not be something that the users are necessarily going to appreciate. Similarly, a subtle contrast that you have for your text and background color might look really good, again, in your design studio and in your comps. It might not be good enough for a user that's in a bright environment. If they're looking at your application out in the sunlight, they might not be able to see everything that you need them to see. So you have to sort of bear that in mind. And then, of course, mobile users have different needs than desktop users, so you also have to bear those things in mind. Now, there's a ton of stuff, and I'm not necessarily going to go deep into the theory, but I think the key here to actually doing this, and what jQuery Mobile helps you do, is embrace the differences. All of these platforms are different, and jQuery Mobile sort of gives you the ability to bridge each of these things and do your own stuff. So by embracing the differences, I mean what you want to do is you want to design layouts and visual elements that can flex. So that way, screen size doesn't matter, screen orientation won't matter. And jQuery Mobile also has the ability to determine the difference between screen orientation. So if it's in landscape or portrait mode, you can have different CSS in either of those situations, so do bear that in mind. And then I also encourage designers to be okay with the concept of graceful degradation. So if some of your target devices have older browsers on them and they don't necessarily handle some things correctly, like background gradients or drop shadows, if you're in a situation like that, be okay with the idea that some users are going to get a different visual experience than others. That's an okay thing, and not everybody has to see exactly the same thing. It can be okay to do that, and that's a really important and key thing, I think, to handle that. Now, one of the things that I always encourage when you're doing this is to collaborate, if you can, with your developers. Now, I don't. Everybody obviously has their own workflow, but if you can even just talk briefly with your developers while you're doing your designs, that can help you really understand the technical limitations of what you're working on and help you play to the strengths as well. And if you can, build prototypes as part of your design process. I've worked on projects where we haven't done comps. We've done simple sketches up on the whiteboard, and then I go away and immediately start building jQuery mobile pages, because it's literally takes minutes to build a jQuery mobile page and get some widgets on the screen and then show it and be like, okay, here's what it is out of the box. And then, okay, we want these different colors, so you go and you add some different colors in and so forth, and you modify the look and feel and give it some different transitions and so forth. I mean, these are very, very quick. You don't have to do any graphics production. It's all really easy code to change and so forth. And jQuery Mobile really enables that sort of rapid prototyping. And the great thing about doing this, and you don't necessarily have to do that. If you want to do it at a point where, for example, you do iterations on your designs manually, and then you get to points where you're comfortable, and you're like, okay, well, let's do a quick prototype and see how well this works. That works, and so forth. Now, the great thing about this is when you do this sort of collaboration, all of this work is just extra development time. So you can actually have, at the end of your design process, you can actually have the entire user interface completely developed. Imagine how great that is. So you're done with your design process, you've done all of your iterations with the client or whoever it is who is approving your work. You've got the UI completely done. You know what it's going to look like. You're done, and you know the developer isn't going to have to change anything. You don't have to worry, is the developer going to be able to do this or anything like that. You already know all of those answers. And you can even use this to do platform validation. So if you have if you work with your designs and you've got in your testing lab, you've got the different form factors you're going to be working with, go and run them on those different devices. You can go ahead and see whether or not your design is going to work on in portrait here or in landscape there and so forth. And you can even use this to get client and user feedback. I'm a big believer in getting usability testing, even if it's just ad hoc testing where you're just like, hey, would you look at this real quick and tell me, what do you think when you see this? And I'm a big believer in that. And this gives you the opportunity to do that. You can load your jQuery mobile application onto your phone and take it over to Starbucks and just bother random people. It's a great opportunity to be able to do that. And of course, you can also show this to the client and work through usability and issues with them, so that while they're like, well, we thought we wanted this dark, but now that we actually see it, and we thought we wanted this here, but now we actually see that actually when the user is actually using this, they have a tendency to tap on the wrong thing and so forth. It really gives you the opportunity to do that. And because jQuery Mobile makes it so easy to make these changes, it's easy for you to literally in just a couple of minutes be like, okay, we'll move this down here, make it a little bit bigger, switch it over to this swatch, and that's really all it takes to actually solve those problems. Whereas before, you might have these things are more difficult to actually demonstrate with even just paper prototypes or just pictures in Photoshop or a PDF or something like that. So if you can work with your developers, it's very important. Get them involved in the prototyping process. If you know a little bit of HTML yourself, don't be afraid of actually doing this. You can easily go in and specify. You just write straight up HTML, and you put in some data attributes to specify what elements are what and what swatches you want them to use, and that's really all it takes to actually build a jQuery mobile prototype. You can do it literally in just a few minutes. So while you're coming up, so that's a little bit of the sort of upper level stuff. While you're actually building a custom jQuery mobile theme, maintain the conventions that jQuery mobile sort of has in place for implementing themes. So remember, you're going to have a set of base settings, and you'll have a set of swatches. So sort of think of things in that way as you're going through your your application design process. So if you have a situation where you might want different fonts for everything, possibly you might need two different themes, because a particular theme only gives you one set of base settings, which is where the font is determined. You can go in and override those things if you want, but that's something to consider. jQuery Mobile does recommend that you have at least 3 swatches, but you can have as many as you want. You can, if you know exactly what you want everything to look like, you could have just a couple if you want. You know, a base swatch and an error swatch or something, whatever works. Name your swatches A through Z. That is the convention that jQuery Mobile does have, and that will help make it easier to switch things out. And remember that you'll be combining swatches on a page. So when you create a swatch, it won't be for it's not the same as a page layout. You won't be actually presenting an entire swatch to a user. You'll just be presenting aspects of that swatch to the user. So remember the example that I cited was, imagine you have a list of buttons and you want it to be displayed in swatch C, which is your default swatch. But a couple of the buttons you want to call attention to. So you want to put them in your swatch A, your higher visual emphasis swatch. And you can go ahead and do that. You say for the button group, I want swatch C, but these 2 particular buttons, because the person has new mail, for example, you want to go ahead and call attention to those particular buttons for their mailboxes. Then you go ahead and specify those particular swatches for those buttons. That's totally doable, and that's the right way. That's the right way to do that. Just be sure to specify what swatches you want to be used when. Let's see here. And that just about covers everything that I had. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and do some Q&A. If you have some questions, go ahead and start giving them to us here. If it's all right, I'll go ahead and start taking a look at some of this stuff here. So we have a question from David Hine. If a website serves both desktop and mobile users, how do you ensure that mobile users see the jQuery mobile pages and the desktop users see the normal pages? So you can easily do that with, well, I don't know to necessarily say that it's easy. That's not something that the jQuery mobile theming system is actually set up to do by itself. What you can do, though, is use Css Media Queries to determine which CSS files are actually included in the application as the browser makes its requests to the server. So you can say for obviously the smaller screen sizes, you want to request the jQuery mobile CSS. For the larger screen sizes, you want to request the desktop CSS. That's one way of doing it. Now, jQuery mobile itself, though, does do more enhancement to the markup than just that. So you probably need to come up with a different way of handling your jQuery mobile in the situation of serving it out to a desktop. You could easily hook into jQuery mobile, and this would require some actual development to go in, have jQuery mobile to check and see what the screen size is and what's been served out, and whether or not it even needs to initialize, or perhaps for a desktop you don't necessarily want any of the jQuery mobile stuff. You might want a different set of things. You might want jQuery UI instead, and so you could load in that stuff instead. That's probably how I'd go about that. That's a big question, and there's a lot of different ways that you could handle that. And then here's another one. What are some ways to coordinate jQuery UI and jQuery mobile themes to minimize duplicate effort for web apps that need to be responsive to both desktop, tablet, and mobile displays? Unfortunately, jQuery UI uses considerably different CSS classes when it progressively enhances your markup. So it's really hard to sort of do that. Now, to my knowledge, there's not even a way of sharing color swatches between the two, which would even that would be nice to be able to say, let me copy my color swatches from one to the other. To my knowledge, there's not even a way to do something simple like that. That would be really nice, but I don't think those capabilities are there. The jQuery UI theme roller is a couple of years old now, and I'm not really sure if there's any effort to do anything like that. I think the jQuery mobile theme roller is a little bit more advanced, but it's also brand new. I think it's less than a year old, or maybe about a year old. So I don't think there's really any way to do that. Unfortunately, it's just something that you'll have to manage manually. I can't think of anything regular like that. If there's any other questions, go ahead and let us know. Otherwise, I can turn things back over to Yasmina.
Looks like, John, we just got one more question that came in from Dom. I'll read it real quick. Dom says, does jQuery Sprite animation work the same over all platforms, or is there a significant performance penalty in these and other animations?
Yeah, so jQuery's, if you're just using jQuery's base animation functions, those are all done with JavaScript, and so yes, there's a significant performance hit on mobile devices. You don't want to use JavaScript-based animations on mobile devices if you can at all avoid it. It's much better to use CSS animations and transitions if you can. It's a little bit harder to produce those, but those are definitely the way to go because those are hardware accelerated. I've done just basic slide in and out animations with JavaScript, and they just look awful, even on the most advanced devices. jQuery Mobile's transitions are all done with CSS. So, the sliding and popping and dropping and so forth, all of those things are CSS3, so they're hardware accelerated. Some platforms don't do some of the transitions, so you have to watch out for that. But again, just sort of, like I said, embrace those differences. All of those problems are, as devices catch up, those problems will eventually become less and less.
Great. Oh, looks like two questions just came in. We have one from Gary. Gary asks, do you have a good example of an extremely PHP-intensive content site?
An extremely PHP-intensive content site. I'm trying to think. So if you're looking for like content management solutions, I'm not really sure. A lot of sites tend to hide their backends from you unless they expose it like in the URL or something like that. I'm trying to think of something. There's most of the content-intensive sites that I use these days are either blogs, some of which are, of course, WordPress is done in PHP, or documentation sites, which can be in just about anything and tend to use content management systems. So the actual back end is hidden. I'm afraid I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. If you were looking for content management solutions, PHP does have some pretty good ones. It's been a while since I've looked at them, though.
Okay, and our final one, it looks like it's coming in from M. Allen, and he asks, does the industry use a single code base for mobile plus desktop?
As a best practice, probably not. I don't think we're actually at the point where the mobile frameworks for web apps, for web-based applications, can actually produce that. You can have your same basic markup for everything, and then because jQuery Mobile does work with basic semantic markup, and then you'll have different JavaScript and CSS for your desktop versus your mobile experiences. So it's all in one code base, but it depends upon, I guess, how you look at it. Your HTML is the same in both spots, but your CSS and your JavaScript are not. So I guess it kind of depends upon how you look at it, because there's sort of three components there. And if you make changes in one, then you need to make changes in the other. The big thing to watch out for when you're thinking about a solution like that is your mobile users are going to have significantly different user needs than your desktop users. And those needs may not just be able to be answered by changes in styles. Those needs may need to be addressed by actual changes in information architecture, in actual interaction design changes. You may not be able to just change your styles and have the users and produce a good web app for users. If you look, so you might end up needing to have a different code for each situation. So then if you're looking at content management solutions in that situation, you can pull out the same content. You want to show the same list of things. It's just in a different spot in the information architecture. You can use a content management solution for that. But it's very important to remember that just making a website look good look good on a mobile device doesn't necessarily make it a good mobile web app or a good mobile website. You really do have to keep in mind the things that your users need. What are they going to be looking for when they go to your website? What are they going to be trying to access when they're hitting your web app? You want to think about those things and make those things easy for them to get to. And a lot of times that's considerably different than what you actually have designed for your desktop.
Perfect. And as we start to wrap up here, one final question in from Victor. Victor asks if you can talk a little about how jQuery Mobile can help add touchscreen interaction.
So, sure. So jQuery Mobile does have an entire set of touch interactions available with it. Let's see here. It handles tap. It handles swipe. It doesn't do multi-finger stuff yet. I would bet that's probably going to happen at some point. But for right now, it doesn't do that. So you can have swipe up and swipe down, swipe left and swipe right. All of those things are simple event listeners that you attach to either elements or entire pages. So, for example, if you're changing pages as for a swipe or something like that, you just add the appropriate event listener to the page or the element that you want, and it'll and then have your event handler listen to that particular, have your event handler attached to that particular event, and it will go ahead and do whatever you tell it to do. So jQuery Mobile does make that quite easy. It uses the standard jQuery event model that you're used to. You can use the it's exactly the same way that you would handle it the other ways. Like I said, it doesn't do multi-finger stuff yet, but I would imagine that's probably coming.
Jon, thank you so much for presenting such an outstanding webcast today. Folks that attended, we thank you for attending our webcast and hope you benefited from it. We did push out some information to you all in the group chat. If you haven't opened that group chat, please do. There's a code in there that can save you some money. We'd like to let you know Jon's book, jQuery Mobile, lots of good information, tips in there that will help you with your day-to-day, and he is in the process of updating that, so we'll let you all know as soon as that new version is ready. But for now, we did push out a code. It can save you some money for his book. Also, Jon is doing another webcast for O'Reilly on September 25th. It's going to be about building mobile applications with jQuery Mobile. You don't want to miss that one. Please do register for it. I guarantee, Jon is an excellent presenter, as you saw from today. It's going to be a fantastic event. Again, we thank you, Jon. Thank you, everyone, for attending. This will conclude today's webcast. Goodbye, everybody.